right, everyone. Welcome to the Burden of Command podcast. On this episode, I have a really special guest. It's somebody I've listened to a lot through all of his various projects. I like what he has to say. I like the way he has to say it. He's written several books. What's Wrong with Damn Near Everything and Grow a Pair are a couple of my favorites. He's done some podcasts of his own. Grow a Pair, which doesn't have any new episodes for a while, but is still available on iTunes. And then the Real Man podcast, which is still in production. You've probably seen him on national media. He does a lot of national media interviews, primarily, it seems lately, Fox and Friends. He is a pit bull of personal development, Mr. Larry Winget. Larry, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you bet. Happy to be here. By the way, the Grow a Pair podcast, I killed that one off. I'm just focusing now on the Real Man podcast.
Yeah, no, I like that. And, like I said, the Grow a Pair, it's still on iTunes. I don't know if you were aware of that, but, people can go back and find it. So some good content there. So to get started, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody to start with. The phrase burden of command. What does that mean to you, Larry?
My initial response to that is a chuckle. I bet you don't get that very often.
Not too often.
It's a chuckle because I believe that we live in a society right now that doesn't think that command, which in most people's minds, I believe these days, relates to power and having power over others. They don't see that as a burden. They look at it two ways, that it's either a real cool thing that they get to be powerful over others, or they immediately go to a victim standpoint that other people have power over me. But I don't think they see it so much anymore as a burden. Now, anybody who's ever run their own company or been a leader of any type realize that anytime you are in charge, there is a huge burden of responsibility that comes with that. And, the pit bull of personal development is the trademarked moniker that I've had for a long time, but it's around the one central theme of personal responsibility, the thing we're most lacking in society these days. But I think that most people wouldn't see command as having or being much of a burden.
And sadly, you're right. I've gotten quite a few responses on that, and some of it, like you said, well, I don't really see it as a burden, but then they always come back to the R word, responsibility, and it's kind of the same thing, right? Burden is a responsibility that you take on, that you carry.
Well, burden has such a negative connotation to it right now. You could also talk about the privilege of command. The saddest thing right now, and it's part of what I talked about in the book, What's Wrong with Damn Near Anything, is this victimhood mentality that I think comes out of the entitlement mentality, which I think is really dangerous in society right now, where we are confused by this whole someone else being in charge of anything. I got into it with a bunch of folks just this last week who had posted the most ridiculously stupid picture on LinkedIn, which I think is the dumbest social media platform out there. I've never had more abuse than I have on LinkedIn, or seen a site more abused than LinkedIn. It seems to me like the only reason people want to connect on LinkedIn is to instantly spam your inbox with something they want to sell you without having qualified you at all.
Right.
But that's an aside. But this ridiculously stupid picture that they posted was of a guy, a stick figure, holding somebody by their feet and sort of swinging them. And he had the label of boss. And the other one was of a stick figure named leader, with patting this guy on the back. And it said, bosses take advantage while leaders inspire. And I thought, what a damn disservice to good bosses. Yep. Bosses are necessary in our society. Not everybody wants to be led. Some people need a manager to say, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you do it. I'm here to make sure it gets done. So the customer is served well, so we all get paid. Mm. Now, bosses are necessary to any project. They're necessary in business for sure, but they're also necessary for some people who aren't looking to be inspired and creative. And this meme went on to talk about how leadership is creative and bosses don't require any creativity. You know, if you're sacking groceries at a grocery store, I'm not looking for creativity. I want the cans on the bottom and the bread on the top. And that's proven to be a pretty good recipe right there. Don't get creative with that, okay?
Right.
Just do it and be nice while you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, man, so much there. So the first, I like what you said about, the responsibility piece. And it reminds me, it's a quote I say a lot about, it's from Epictetus. And he says, men are disturbed not by things, but the view of which they take of them. And, that was one of the core principles. I'm not sure if you've studied the POWs from the Handle at Hilton very much. But one of the phenomenal things about those gentlemen is, so the general PTSD rate from the Vietnam War was about 40%. And everybody expected that the POWs were going to have a much higher rate, but they're down in the low 3 to 4%. And everyone you talk to, I had Colonel Lee Ellis on a few episodes ago, but every one of those that you talk to, they bring it back to the personal responsibility. Like, we had to take personal responsibility for our actions and the actions of the folks around us to get each other through without breaking down. If we'd let ourselves blame our predicament on anything and everything else, it would have ruined us mentally, and we probably would have had near 100% PTSD rate. So I really like that.
Yeah.
And, and so it's funny because I know you talk a lot about customer service and how that's very important. And you were talking about the groceries. I had an incident. I live in Indiana, and every time we have a snowstorm that's more than a few inches, we have the run on milk, bread, and eggs. And I was in the store, and there was a young man. I just got done listening to one of your podcast episodes. You were talking about, I think it was your garage door being installed, and the person was showed up later, didn't show up at all.
Yeah.
And it was ringing in my ears. And this guy, they called for all help up front. They needed baggers. And this kid, he just huffs and was acting annoyed. And I looked at him and said, I looked at him straight in the face. I said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shop here and give you a job. And he looked at me. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're obviously annoyed by the fact that shoppers are here. We're the reason you have a job. Would you like me to shop someone else? And my wife's like, you've been listening to that Larry Winget guy way too much.
Good for you. Been listening to that Larry Winget guy. I get that a lot, that Larry Winget guy.
But so, in all of your work, I mean, and like I said, you've had some TV shows, you've read a bunch of books, that personal responsibility is a big theme throughout your career, it seems. What got you there?
Oh, that's the main theme pretty much of all that I do. I have this overriding belief, and it's the thing that's driven 6 New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestsellers and my own TV show and 30 years of standing on stages, speaking for over 400 of the Fortune 500 companies, speaking all over the world, being translated into over 20 languages, sold a couple of million books. And all of that comes down to the very simple idea, your life's your own damn fault. And boy, I get a lot of pushback on that. And people want to convince me, no, it's not. Something happened to me. And I never argue with anybody about that. I just say, okay, so something horrible happened to you that you had nothing to do with. I'm not going to argue. That's what happened. What you do about it's still your own fault. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's always going to come down to. I believe that your thoughts, your words, and your actions cause whatever it is you're going through. I can't think of an occurrence where maybe that isn't the case, but a lot of people have them. And so if something bad happens to you, first of all, your job is to say, did I do something to cause that? It's like the oldest joke in the world. Guy goes in the doctor and says, "Hey, doctor, it hurts when I do that." The doctor says, "Then don't do that." So if you're doing something that hurts you, stop doing it. Then the second thing is, once you've looked at yourself and taken responsibility for your own thoughts, words, and actions, you say, okay, I really didn't cause this, but what am I going to do about it? That is always up to you. It's just like your POW story. They had to make the decision. That was a personal decision that they would act in a certain way, react in a certain way, respond in a certain way to their situation, predicament, and their treatment. That was a personal choice of theirs, how they responded. And that's what we have to remember. First of all, you say, what did I do that could possibly have caused it? Take responsibility for it. Now, what do I do in my response or reaction to this? Take responsibility for that and then do something. None of this stuff's all that hard.
No, it's really not. And that's, that's another theme of when I'm doing talks or whatever. So going back to something you said earlier on, in the Marines, we had a saying that teams succeed, leaders fail. And we put this thing together, kind of how you said it with the leadership and management piece, right? And the way we were taught is, essentially as you said, you need both. You need leaders and managers. The question shouldn't be what's the difference. The question should be, how do you work both angles together at the right time for the right purpose? And the idea behind teams succeed, leaders fail was just that. If you've done everything you can as a leader, your team is going to succeed. If you have failed in any one of those aspects, either you failed to put the right person on the right task, you failed to lay out the proper guidelines, you failed to manage things when you need to manage, you failed to lead when you need to lead, well, shit's going to hit the fan, and yes, everything's going to fail, but it's your fault. The team will succeed, you'll fail.
That's absolutely right. And a good leader can be a good manager, and all good managers should still be good leaders. But you got to have both.
Yeah, definitely. So, so let's talk about this book, the What's Wrong with Damn Near Everything. I think we kind of hit on it a little bit, but for our listeners who may not, for whatever reason, be indoctrinated into the world of Winget, what is wrong with damn near everything?
I had written 6 New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestsellers about, if you got kids that are a mess, and I wrote a book called Your Kids Are Your Own Fault. It was pretty much a how-to book on parenting to raise productive, responsible adults. And I did the same thing around a best-selling money book called You're Broke Because You Want to Be. You can tell from the themes of those books and the titles that it's all about personal responsibility. So I'd written these 6 books telling folks, if this is your situation, go do these things. And then after selling a couple of million books, I realized not very many people were doing what I suggested they do. They were still in the mess they were in. There is no shortage of people telling you what you should do to fix your issue. So if that's the case, and it is, that there's lots of information out there about what you could do to do things differently and have better results in your life, why aren't people doing it? And what I came to realize is that you can't get a bad employee to do a good job for very long. You can threaten him with, I'm going to fire you, or you can tease him with it's the carrot and the stick thing, or I'll give you a promotion or a raise if you do it. But a bad employee, a bad person is going to be a bad employee because that's the kind of person they are. And the same way in all areas of life, what we've tried to do is say, if you'll just do these things, your results will change. Well, not if you're not going to do those things. And the people who don't do the right thing, they're not good people. So what I realized, and that's why I wrote What's Wrong with Damn Near Everything, we're trying to give people good things to do, understanding they're not going to do them because they're not good people. They lack the core values. So the subtitle of What's Wrong with Damn Near Everything is the collapse of core values and how it's destroying us. So I believe that a person who is honest and has integrity and is kind and is willing to do the right thing, even when it's the hard thing or the expensive thing or whatever, that's the right thing, that people who have core values eventually figure out, even without our help, they need some guidance sometimes, but they will do the right thing because they're good people and are constantly looking to do the right thing. Bad people, no matter what you tell them to do, aren't going to do it for very long because they're bad people. We need to focus more on the core values that people have. I
couldn't agree more. There's, I'm not sure if you've read Jordan Peterson's book, 8 Simple Rules for Life.
Yeah.
But I think he nails it. And what you just said there, like, are you sure you weren't a Marine at some point in your life?
No, I was just raised by good mamas. And, let me tell you what, I think we give credit, and I give the military all the credit in the world, and I come from a family where everybody was in the military, and my son was in the military, and my dad and grandpa and all that sort of stuff. But we want to give credit to, let's say, the military and say, you must have been in the military. You remember when mamas and daddies taught this.
Mm-hmm.
And mamas and daddies are responsible for teaching their kids core values.
Yep.
And I was very fortunate to have a mom and daddy that it was about being a good person above everything else. It was telling the truth. It was having integrity, which means doing the right thing even when nobody's ever going to know. It was about when you give your word, you keep your word no matter what. It was about being kind and being grateful and all that. Those are the core values that I was raised with. And that's where I think we've slipped away. People don't think anything in the world about showing up late.
Mm-hmm.
Being late's a lack of respect for the person. Being late is a lack of respect in business for your boss and for the money and for the customer and for the coworkers. Being late is insulting to your friends. It shows you matter more than they do, or you matter, what you're doing at the time matters more than the fact that you gave your word. But most people think, hey, I was just a little bit late. It's fashionably late. In other words, it's fashionably disrespectful because
right.
That's what it means. And so there are lots of examples on that where, we've just slipped on those core values.
No, again, when I'm telling my story, people ask, and I start with, my mom and dad split when I was just a few months old. I haven't seen my dad but a handful of times in my 40 years on this planet, and my mom has struggled with various drug issues throughout her entire life. I get to, that's terrible. No, that was one of the best things that happened to me because I ended up being raised by my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, grew up, poor country boy, and he instilled every one of those things that you're talking about in me. He taught me how to be a man, what that meant, and the responsibilities. I mean, shoot, when I was 10 years old, I had to push mow 3 acres. You make a 10-year-old push mow 3 acres today and see how many law enforcement agencies are knocking on your door, right?
Yeah, it's like when they called the child services on the guy who made his kid walk a half mile to school. Really? I mean, that's a true story. And he gets child services because it was raining outside. That was the kid's punishment. It was raining and he made him walk to school in the rain. Oh my God. I went to school every single day and it was a lot more than a half mile. And it didn't matter what the weather was. I had to get to school. But, we can all play this. This is how I grew up. And this is what about your story. And I'm glad that you put it like that. I've discovered nobody can pour me more than the next guy. I can stand up and say, here's my sad story. And then immediately somebody says, well, let me tell you my sad story. We can sit around and pour me and sad story ourselves into oblivion. Everybody's got a worse story than the next guy does. Bottom line is, shit happens to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Suck it up, buttercup. You don't get to change what happened to you in the past. The only thing you have any impact on is the way you're going to live your present. I don't even give a damn about the future. Everybody says, just focus on the future. No, focus on right this instant. What can I do right this instant? In the book that we're talking about here, What's Wrong with Damn Near Everything? I was doing an interview on Brian Kilmeade's show, and he says, Larry, you paint this picture of where we are in society and in business and in government and in school systems and in our homes and so forth. How do we change the world if this is how it is? And I said, we don't. And he said, that's not a very optimistic approach. I said, I'm sorry, we can't fix the world. We can't fix society. We can't fix our businesses. The best we can possibly do is fix ourselves right this minute. That's all I can do. I can have some impact on what I say, what I think, and what I do right now. I can't make you any promises 10 minutes from now. I can't guarantee how anybody else is going to react, what they're going to say, what they're going to do. I got nothing. I can't fix the world. The world doesn't want to be fixed anyway. When the world wants to be fixed, it'll be as a result of enough individuals doing just what I said. You got a whole lot of folks that say, right this minute, I'm going to think, act, and behave in such a way that it is true to my core values of honesty, integrity, being a good person, treating folks right. You do that. I do that. Enough people do that. And that's when the world starts to change a little bit. But we've made our focus the world, and somehow that's an excuse for our own bad behavior. It's our own bad behavior that caused the world to be that way in the first place.
Yes. And, when we're recording this, last week was the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and Gene Kranz gets a lot of credit, rightfully so. But everybody wants to focus on Apollo 13, which was a great time for him. But everybody forgets Apollo 1, when we lost White, Chaffee, and Grissom on the launch pad. And the story that I love to tell about that is how he handled that situation. There was an investigation. It was a government level. We lost 3 high-valued astronauts. But before anybody had a chance to gather any evidence or anything like that, he gathered his team together and he says, look, it was our fault. I don't care what the committee says. It was our fault. We didn't do these things. We didn't do this thing. We didn't do that thing. We will be better. And he took complete 100% ownership, and he gave him corrective action, told him what to do going forward, what the expectations were going to be, and he fixed it. They went off relatively without a hitch from that point forward. And everybody knew at that point, when you see something screwed up, you better raise your hand and say, we got to stop. He pretty much gave everybody kill command powers from that point. If you see something that's going to be dangerous, you better stand up and say stop. And it's the response part. We keep coming back to this theme, right? The response part. Like you said, if everybody worried about themselves instead of complaining about what their boss is doing, what their boss needs to improve to be a better leader, what do you need to do to be a better leader? That's how you fix the world, one person at a time. You're never, like you said, you're never going to get everybody collectively to say, hey, we all need to fix it right now. So I love that.
Cool.
Yeah, like I said, full disclosure to everybody here, I'm kind of a Larry Winget fanboy from jump. Yeah, I like your attitude. I like the way you put it, like the no bullshit, no sugarcoating delivery. And so I think the world needs a lot more Larry Winget. So, well, sir, we're coming up on that magic time frame here. We're hitting about 24 minutes or so. I always like to start working towards a closeout with this last question here of, is there anything that you and I haven't discussed that you think we should hit on before we close out?
The most popular question I get, and I do a lot of podcasts, I do a lot of interviews, I've spoken all over the world, is, Larry, bottom line, what's it take to be more successful? And here's what I always tell people. Bottom line, get 3 sheets of paper, just 3 sheets of paper and a pen. On the first sheet of paper, write down where you are in every area of your life. I mean, every area, your weight, your relationships, your health, how you're doing on your job, your money, you pick it. Write down a full assessment of your life. And then on the second sheet of paper, write down how you want it to be in each one of those areas. This is how it is, and then this is how I want it to be. And then on the third sheet of paper, and this is the most important, write down what you're going to give up to get from where you are to where you want to be. And that's where we run into problems. We've got all these motivational bozos out there telling folks they can have it all. Well, folks, you can't have it all. You're going to have to choose. You're going to have to give something up. I believe I was the very first personal development person in the business that said success is based on sacrifice, because we are not a society that is interested in sacrifice or giving up anything. But you have to understand, you don't get successful. You give up what's keeping you from being successful. You don't even get skinny. You give up what's making you fat. You don't get rich. You give up what's making you broke. You don't get happy. You give up what's making you unhappy. So all true success comes from giving up, from sacrifice, from doing away with certain things. And then success is what you're left with after you've done that. And so I would encourage people listening to us here to take those 3 sheets of paper, figure out where they are, figure out where they want to be, and figure out what they're going to give up to get from where they are to where they want to be.
Yeah, no, that's powerful stuff. And for anybody listening, make sure you go in. I do transcripts for all my shows. So, those 3 sheets will be in the transcripts there, and I'll try to highlight those in the show notes. Look, Larry, thanks for being with us. I really, really appreciate your time. Hopefully, I've exposed some new people to the world of Winget there. We had some of your friends on here already, Mr. Joe Calloway, Jim Bouchard, I think you know Dov Barron. Got some more folks coming up, so I really appreciate your time. And for the listeners, look, if you have any questions for me, if you have any questions you want me to get to Larry, burden.command@gmail.com. Just hit me up there. That's burden.command@gmail.com. This show will be coming out in a few weeks from the time that we've recorded. So some of these things might be a little outdated, but we'll try to reference them there. I'll have links to Larry's books, Larry's website, Larry's social media accounts, and I highly, highly encourage that you make Larry Winget part of your personal development journey in whatever shape or form that's taken right now. So Larry, again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Appreciate you having me.
All right, listeners, and we'll talk to you again in the next episode.